Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on our live stream of Seth Cardinal Dodging Horses Artist Talk on Facebook Live and Zoom. It's always nice to attend a talk in person, but it's still pretty great having the opportunity for people near and far to listen in. We would like to begin by honoring and acknowledging that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations, and the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We also like to acknowledge that we are in immediate proximity to the Bow River here at Contemporary Calgary, and that's a site that resonates with all of us today and with Indigenous populations for thousands of years. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. In particular, our presenting sponsor, Moore, our exhibition benefactor, Gertrude Kohos, and exhibition patrons, Warren Jensen and Brenda Silver, Mode Models, and Carol Ryder. So tonight, we are very pleased to welcome Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse. Seth is a multidisciplinary artist, an experimental musician, and a recent graduate of the Alberta University of the Arts. I love this. He grew up eating dirt and exploring the forest of his family's ancestral land on the Tsuut'ina Nation. In 2014, he and his family were forcibly removed from their homes and land for the construction of the Southwest Calgary Ring Road. His work explores his own experiences of displacement and family history. So this talk is part of our public programming around the exhibition Growing Freedom, which has two parts: the instructions of Yoko Ono and the art of John and Yoko. We're thrilled to offer these exhibitions to our Calgary community, though of course also saddened that this pandemic has kept our doors closed for much of the duration of the exhibition. But tonight's presentation is possible because Seth kindly agreed to collaborate with Yoko Ono on our new iteration of Water Event, along with Adrian Stimson, Faye Heavyshield, Jesse Short, Judy Anderson, and Kablusiak. Seth's talk will conclude our public programming around Growing Freedom and Water Event. So I'd like to take this opportunity to warmly thank all of these artists for their thoughtful contributions. As Yoko herself noted to us, it was one of the best iterations to date. And just before we start, a little background on Water Event. In 1971, as part of her first museum exhibition, This Is Not Here, Yoko invited people to produce a water sculpture that she would work on as well, establishing a unity between artists. The piece was titled Water Event, and in that first iteration, she actually invited 120 participants, including the likes of Andy Warhol, George Maciunas, Richard Hamilton, and many others. There's a great quote that I like to include that she said at Water Event. "It was a Zen joke, I thought. Jokes and laughter are very important elements in Zen. This particular joke is that I get all the containers from the artists to fill them with water, and the water I supplied is conceptual, meaning I never filled them with actual water. I like that bit. It gives me a laugh right away, and as soon as I thought of the idea, I knew it was a good piece." So when we were tasked with inviting a new group of artists for this current iteration of Water Event, we immediately knew that it should reflect the enormous significance water has played in our community. And when you consider the long history and impact of the Bow and Elbow rivers to the Indigenous populations past and present, it seemed the best thing would be to invite artists for whom that connection would resonate in their collaboration with Yoko. And with that, it made perfect sense to invite Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse. And I will pass the mic over to you, Seth.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to Contemporary Calgary and all of the folks that were involved. And, big thank you to all of the other artists that I got to be a part of the show with. They're all amazing and talented, and they're people that I look up to, and they're people that, they're all just very beautiful people. And it is an honor to have my work sit next to theirs. And so yeah, make sure that to those of you watching that you look at their work and support them and everything. And thank you to all the folks that have come out to watch my talk. Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen now. Let's see if I mess this up. Okay, so for this presentation slash artist talk that I'm doing, I wanted to share like a bit of history, Tsuut'ina history. I grew up on my grandmother's land, and it's on Tsuut'ina, and it goes back. It's land that goes back. The connection to it goes back through my grandmother's, and I thought it'd be a good idea to start this presentation first with a photograph of Bullhead. And so this is Chilla. This is Tsuut'ina's chief Bullhead that signed Treaty 7 in 1877, and he signed it on behalf of his people. And the fact that I was able to grow up and live on the land that I did is because of Bullhead. And I feel like Calgarians and Albertans, I think in different places and in different contexts, people see images of Bullhead. And I think like this photo comes from a series that is often shared and seen. And like people don't often understand who Bullhead was as a person. And so kind of to describe Bullhead, he lost his right eye to TB at a young age, and I've seen this photo posted on Facebook, and I've seen white people comment on it and be like, I don't know, they see it and they're like, look at this powerful like Indian warrior who's, you know, I wonder what the story is, losing his eye. Did he like lose it in battle? You know, and they kind of start formulating these wild stories just within like the comment section on Facebook. And he didn't lose his eye to like an enemy. He lost it from an illness that was brought by settlers. And Bullhead, in this photograph, he's holding a rifle. And I was talking to my grandfather, Bruce Starlight, and I have to, you know, give him a lot of credit to teaching me a lot about our family history and our Tsuut'ina history. And we were talking recently, and he'd mentioned that Bullhead, when he signed Treaty 7, he was given a rifle. The chiefs that had signed Treaty 7, I think they were each given a rifle. And I showed him this photo. We've looked at this photo and talked about it before, but we were kind of thinking like, you know, maybe this is the rifle he was given. And so I kind of got to do a bit more research and figure out what model of rifle they were given and what model of rifle this is in the photograph. But in the photo, you can see he's wearing his treaty medal that he got. And that's what that is. And so Bullhead was the head chief of Tsuut'ina. And my relation to him is, this is a photograph of my grandparents taken in the 1890s, I believe. And so the man on the right, our right, his name was Big Plume, and he was Bullhead's older brother. And this is my grandfather going back. So my family has a big, strong connection going back to like hereditary chieftainships and leadership roles within Tsuut'ina. And so Bullhead in the previous photo was the head chief of Tsuut'ina. He was the hereditary chief. And Big Plume in this photo, my grandfather, going back generations before me, he was a minor chief of Tsuut'ina, and he was also one of the and it's a woman holding a woman, and this is my grandmother. So this is a photo of residential school and stuff. Like not too many stories and knowledge has been passed on, like stories of who Woman Holding a Woman was, and all we really know is that she was Tsuut'ina, and that she was one of Big Plume's wives, and you know, their descendants live on today through me, my cousins, my relatives. On Tsuut'ina, the majority of our population comes from just very few families that survived, and Big Plume and Woman Holding a Woman is one of those families that survived. You know, smallpox, tuberculosis outbreaks. They didn't go to residential school, but their children, their younger children, were the first generation to go to residential school, and then their grandchildren. And so I was doing research and I found this photo, and I asked my grandfather Bruce about it, and he shared a lot of stories with it. And this is also Bruce's grandparents going back. And this is another photo of Big Plume, and it's kind of hard to see, but like his hair, you can see his like hair here. He has there's like one long braid that's going down into his blanket, and Bruce was telling me that he like had really long hair, and in the early 1900s in Calgary, had participated in I guess there was a contest held for who had the longest hair, and he participated in it. And I can't remember if he won it or not, but that's like an interesting fact that Bruce had taught me. And so this is a photograph of Tsuut'ina, and I believe they're camped outside of Fort Calgary. And this photo was taken in the 1890s. And so if you look kind of like at the horizon line, you can see like houses and structures. And this is Tsuut'ina Canada camped out on the outside. So originally when Bullhead had signed Treaty 7 in 1977, the Tsuut'ina people, we were placed on one giant reserve at Blackfoot Crossing with the Siksika, and we lived there for a couple years, but you know, due to like illnesses, due to settler illnesses, due to residential school, due to like all the stresses of becoming essentially put on these concentration camps, and Bullhead didn't want the Tsuut'ina people to live on this one giant reserve because there was too many people fighting for resources. And so Bullhead packed up the Tsuut'ina people. There weren't very many. There was like less than 500 people. Packed them up and sent them to Fort Calgary. And Bullhead and all of the Tsuut'ina people went to Fort Calgary. And when they got to Fort Calgary, Bullhead demanded that like a government representative, that they could speak to a government representative, and that Bullhead was demanding that Tsuut'ina receive their own reserve and be placed on the land of their choosing. And they were denied that, and you know, essentially arrested and escorted by the RCMP and taken to Fort Macleod. And this kind of back and forth ended up happening where Bullhead would pack the people up, take them back to Fort Calgary. And just imagine in the past walking, the majority of people walking, and you know, traveling by wagon and like walking, and it's like winter and just how harsh it was. And they traveled back and forth. You know, Bullhead would demand that the Tsuut'ina people would receive their own reserve, and then they were placed onto taken back to Fort Macleod. So eventually, the last time Bullhead went there, he armed all the women and children, every single Tsuut'ina person with weapons. And in between traveling and being escorted by RCMP to Calgary, the fort, it was just a fort at the time, and Fort McLeod. I don't know how many folks have driven there, but it's quite a distance. And so during that time, there was people that were passing away from, illnesses. They're passing away from starvation, all of this. So people were lost during that time, and Bullhead armed all of the Tsuut'ina people. And so my grandparents would have been there as well. And Bullhead threatened to burn down Fort Calgary, and had told them, we demand that we receive the land of our choosing. And the Tsuut'ina people have a long history of being connected to where the reserve is now. And so Bullhead had wanted them to, if you're going to be stuck somewhere, you want to be stuck somewhere that you're familiar with, and that is more of your home place. And so there wasn't that many people at Fort Calgary, but they had kind of lied, and they're like, this is going to be a huge battle. And so it was this very tense situation. And finally, someone came from Ottawa and had traveled, came to Fort Calgary, and then Tsuut'ina told them, what they wanted. And so in 1883, the Treaty 7, there was another mini treaty that was signed, and I guess an adhesion to Treaty 7 was made, and Tsuut'ina was granted where the reserve is now. They were Bullhead had sent scouts to go to where the land was on Tsuut'ina, and when they got there, finally all the Tsuut'ina people had gotten there, and it was almost kind of like a game too, because one of their names, it'll come back to me, but the person who was the head colonel and representative was like, okay, you guys can have that land, but you have to, people have to be there by the time this representative from Ottawa comes. And so they had started building the foundations for a house on the land. And then just gonna take 1 second to fix the internet. 1 second. And so eventually we came to the land in Bullhead. There's still a rock cairn. There's this pile of rocks here on the reserve. And so Bullhead had asked that all of the Tsuut'ina people place a rock on the land. And so my grandparents and my relatives all placed rocks there. And this was a reminder, Bullhead said, to, we fought so hard to be, to have this reserve here, to be where we are. We almost lost everything. We all almost died out. So this is a physical reminder never to part with the land. And Bullhead's house was built close to that rock cairn. And so these are some photographs or scans of, this is a playing card that I have. So I've been collecting postcards, any type of media I can find that have Tsuut'ina people on them. And I found some that have my grandparents, that people, and a woman holding a woman on a postcard. And this is a playing card. It says Sarsi Indian Encampment. And, to people who don't know, Tsuut'ina was called Sarsi at the time it was made. And there's a bit of history behind the word Sarsi. It's a Blackfoot word. And over time, it came to kind of have a more, originally, Tsuut'ina people were called Sarsis because it kind of meant bold or brave, or, kind of stubborn, but, someone who understands their boundaries. And eventually over time, from colonialism and all this, it came to have a negative connotation. And so, the Tsuut'ina people ended up becoming known as the Sarsi people. And I think it was in the 1980s that Tsuut'ina went back to, either the 1980s or the 1990s, Tsuut'ina went back to going by Tsuut'ina, which is our traditional name that we're known by. And this is a postcard that shows people here on Tsuut'ina. So a man sitting down in a crow collar, and his wife that's beside him. You know, there's the racist language here that says Sarsi Squan Pony, and unfortunately her name due to the same reason as why there isn't very many stories and knowledge about my grandmother, woman holding woman. You know, it affected many of the women on Tsuut'ina and many of our grandmothers. And this is a photograph of, on the right side is my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, Winnie Bull Crowchild. Her maiden name was Crowchild, and she married a bull. But I believe this photo was taken in the 1910s, and standing next to her is her sister, Bessie McGuinness. And, you know, so many people from Tsuut'ina, the two women in this photo, this is our grandmothers. And so Winnie, I grew up on Winnie's land on Tsuut'ina, which is, you know, unfortunately it's underneath the ring road. So it's not just the land that I lived on that's underneath the ring road. It's the land that my mother and her siblings grew up on. It's the land that my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, it's the land that they all lived on. And, you know, so many cousins and relatives, and so many people from Tsuut'ina have so many ties and connections to that land because of Winnie and because of Bessie as well. And so this is a photo, I think my mom took it, but this is like a photo of our land. And I just kind of wanted to, I think this photo was taken in 2003 or 2002, but I just kind of wanted to show you how green and full the land was. And this is my family's garden. There's me going to one of our other gardens that was in our backfield. And then there's me going to the garden, another photo. And then this is our garden. And I kind of wanted to talk a bit about the Glenmore Reservoir. So the piece I made for the show, I made a container, and because, so living on this land in this photograph, the water we drank was some of the most beautiful and delicious water you could drink. And in 2014 and 2013, because of the ring road, my family was forced to leave that land. And the land that we came to live on another part of Tsuut'ina, there's quite a bit of the houses on Tsuut'ina, you can't drink the water for like different various reasons. It's all kind of connected to the land. There's even like issues with the results because of fracking nearby. And so the land that I live on currently, I can't drink the water from the tap. It's like, it's not the worst water, but it's been like highly suggested. I've had the water tested and everything. It's like, so we haven't been able to drink the water since we moved to the newer location. And so the container I made was responding to, I think in August, Contemporary Calgary reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to make a container and you know, some type of sculpture for Yoko Ono's water event. And I thought it would be a great idea to use the water jugs. So my piece is just, I think it's a 1.8 milliliter, or it's like a bottle of water. And actually, I have one right beside here, I'll grab. So my family has had to drink from a water container, and so this is one of them. And I thought, why don't I use one of these? Because, you know, my family's had to, we didn't grow up having to purchase water. We didn't grow up having to, you know, be afraid of what was coming from our tap. And so we've been drinking from these water bottles for quite a bit now. And I thought, why don't I just like use one of these and kind of highlight the issue of like drinking water, and also, you know, where does the water that I'm purchasing come from? And So the Glenmore Reservoir was actually quite a large portion of it was once a part of the Tsuut'ina Reserve, and it was actually very close to where I grew up. And so in like 1931, Tsuut'ina ended up surrendering, from pressure from Calgary, from the government. They surrendered 400 acres of land to the city of Calgary. And there was also issues where when even after the land that they surrendered, that there was, so the Glenmore Reservoir was built for the drinking water for Calgary, and there was homes down there. There was like settlers' homes. And so after the Glenmore Reservoir Dam was built, there was actually lands that was flooded on Tsuut'ina. And people on Tsuut'ina felt that it was, it was an invalid surrendering of land, and that there is additional lands that were lost due to flooding. And so like in 2008, or in 2001, Tsuut'ina had started a federal court action in order to be compensated for the lands for the Glenmore Reservoir properly. And in 2013, I'm just reading some notes that I made, but so after 2001, there was negotiations between Tsuut'ina and the Canadian government in order to figure out a way to, deal with this land loss, and also, figure out how to, what to do. And so there was negotiations up until 2013 on July 6th, the Glenmore Reservoir land surrender and land claim was settled, and Tsuut'ina agreed to accept, compensation for it. But unfortunately, due to accepting that land claim and due to accepting to get paid, Tsuut'ina had lost that land and had chosen not to receive that land back, or to fight to get that land back. And that wasn't necessarily tied to the Southwest Calgary Ring Road, but there was some political, it was politically tied to the Ring Road, because plans for the Ring Road, there was plans for the Ring Road to go through like the Weaselhead Park area and communities in Lakeview. And the Weaselhead natural area isn't necessarily a natural area, because so much of the landscape had been changed from the flooding and from the creation and flooding for the Glenmore Reservoir for the drinking water of the city of Calgary. And so it, quite a big amount of it was, not necessarily a natural area in the same terms of the land that was on Tsuut'ina's side across the fence, which was land that had been undeveloped, wasn't as affected by the building of the Glenmore Reservoir. Although, like, I'm sure, like, the effects of building a dam, there's so many different effects that like trickle out in all these different ways on the environment. But Tsuut'ina had like gone through with settling this land dispute, which unfortunately was also a way for them to focus on selling land for the Southwest Calgary Ring Road. And there's just so much loaded history behind the Glenmore Reservoir and my family as well, because it's very strange and very ironic that my family, once we moved, in order to drink water, we had to drink water from land that was originally part of Tsuut'ina, and that I was like essentially purchasing water back from, ancestral lands, and that, that this was a thing that was happening. And so, creating this work, originally, it was kind of one of those art ideas. There's different things that kind of pop up for me, where some things kind of take a while for me to like mold in my head and like come like, make. And for this one, it was just like, okay, I'll like use this container. And originally what I was going to do was I was just going to like use the container as it is with the labeling that even says, that says like municipal water and different things like that. But for the work that I created for Contemporary Calgary, let's see if I can load up a photo. I think it's in my downloads. So this was the work that I created for Contemporary Calgary, and so I ended up creating my own label from a piece of elk parfleche hide, and I painted on the inside. It's like pretty hard to see, but on the label that's wrapped around the center, I painted on the inside using traditional. It says, "You drink Tsuut'ina land," and I named the piece the Glenmore Reservoir. And all of this was kind of like responding and thinking about all of this like history that comes from drinking water. And not just on Tsuut'ina, there's a lot of issues with drinking water, and it's still an issue on many reserves and First Nations and communities and Indigenous communities all over in Canada. And so this work ended up, it was very easy to make, but then thinking about the history behind the objects, behind my family's history, all of these connections. It was one of those really nice pieces in a way where I made this, and then afterwards I kind of started thinking and analyzing and really understanding what I had made. Whereas other times, sometimes I do a lot of research building up to making something, and I play around with materials and objects. But for this one, the materials and objects came first, and they just came together. I think I made it in a day, but even still now thinking about it, there's so much loaded history in creating this thing. And yeah, that's kind of like my background behind making it.
Thanks, Seth. That was great.
You.
Really appreciate you being so candid with your story, and certainly you're right that that seemingly mundane container is in fact so loaded. It's made for a very popular piece here at Contemporary Calgary, so thanks for that. We just have a couple questions so far. I encourage people to share in the Q&A, and we'd happily throw them Seth's way. One is, they missed what you'd said about the label and what it said.
Sure.
You had a small lag. If you could repeat that.
Okay. So for the work that I made, the label I made, I painted on the inside. So the only way it's kind of revealed is if it's really bright out and you kind of look at the bottle from like an angle like this. And what I wrote inside, it says, "You drink Tsuut'ina land," and that's just speaking about the where the source of water is coming from and the connection to the land. But yeah, it says, "You drink Tsuut'ina land" on the inside.
Thank you. And here's a fun question from Chris Graham. What would you grow in your vegetable garden?
So we grew carrots. We grew lots of carrots. We grew sunflowers a couple times. Pumpkins. My mom, I remember I helped her plant pumpkins, and that was really cool because I'd never grown pumpkins. A lot of this was, I think I was like 5 years old or 6 years, 5 or 6 years old when we first started planting in the garden. And before that, that garden that was in the photos was the same area that my grandmother and like my great grandmother's, that was their same garden. And it hadn't been, it'd been grown over. And so me and my family, me and my mom and some of my relatives, worked the land and brought that garden, back to where it was before and how it was being used. And so I remember we grew a bunch of pumpkins there, and then my mom moved the pumpkins just a little bit over to accommodate something else, and then we ended up killing the pumpkins. They didn't grow to be really big, so I just remember them like being green and everything. But yeah, we grew carrots. I think we grew radish. I really remember the carrots because the carrots were my favorite, and I would just like pull them out of the ground and eat them, even though they had dirt on them and stuff. But that's some of the stuff we grew.
It's eating dirt when growing up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions are popping up here. Chris, thank you for sharing your vegetable stories, and asks and says that we grow some of the same items here in East Calgary. What do you hope your piece inspires for change to the way the city of Calgary deals with your nation for future projects and the water quality issues that you've raised?
So I'm hoping, kind of with this piece, like I understand like with this piece that they're, having work in a gallery, there's only like a certain crowd that goes there, to certain galleries that are like part of a certain scene and community. And that, a lot of the people that were involved in a lot of these decisions historically that are still here aren't really the type of people that go to galleries. So I think with this type of work, I was like focused on like reaching out to, kind of like the average like white Calgarian that goes to galleries and everything. And I've been making art. I think for the past 6 years, I've been having my work showing in galleries, and over that time, I've kind of learned about the particular audiences and that go to the shows and stuff. But I was hoping with this work that I know when people were able to access, go into the public space earlier on in the pandemic and everything, that people would read the artist statement, and it was kind of one of those works where you kind of look at it and then you're kind of like, okay, that's cool, or like I don't get it and whatever, but there was a lot of info in the artist statement. And so I was hoping with the artist statement to like people to get educated on certain things and learn a bit about where they live and everything. And so that was kind of one of those things where like I wasn't going to be at the gallery all the time to explain things to everyone, but I did want people to know my intentions behind it. So that's why I wanted people to learn from that. But I think like going forward, I do want people to learn more about the history, because when you learn more about the history, it's kind of just like the pandemic in the way where unfortunately there's a lot of people that just are like going on with their lives and like treating the world as if like the pandemic as if like everything's okay and normal, and like everything's kind of surface level. But with living in Calgary, outside of the pandemic, it's like even the history and relationship to the land for Calgarians, it's not everything is like normal. There's a lot more deeper. There's a lot more stuff that there's a reason why you know, Calgary is where it is. There's a reason why Calgary's drinking water, why Calgary, you know, where that comes from. So yeah, I'm hoping that like outside of art and everything for myself, uh, someday I would really love to write a book on like the history and stuff, something that's kind of more accessible to, you know, people that do read books and, you know, are interested in that stuff. But yeah, I think, I think with this work, I just really wanted people to kind of like broaden their knowledge and history of Calgary and Tsuut'ina.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Tsuut'ina, Michael Graham was wondering about your take on the ongoing NIMBYism, not in my backyard, in the communities around Tsuut'ina. He says their voices seem quite loud and well represented about dust and other concerns. Does that impact your work, your practice?
Yeah, you know, like while my family was moving for the ring road and while we were, you know, while we were like packing up our lives, you know, we would like get in the car and the radio would be on and they'd be talking about the news and they'd be talking about like Lakeview residents, Woodbine residents, you know, talking about these communities and how like they were opposed to having the road be built. You know, there was all of their concerns were heard and voiced. They were like, you know, will a fence be put up so that we don't get to hear the noise when, you know, when it was like, uh, you know, the roads tearing down our home and tearing down our, you know, all of the environment, all of these things, and you know, there there wasn't really people that wanted to listen to us or hear us, and you know, felt very small. While all of these people who were just inconvenienced by the road, um, you know, while their inconveniences that were very small compared to our lives were being heard everywhere, and that's still an ongoing thing. And I don't know, that's a big issue with the media and everything, and it's um, yeah, like I think since October, I did a speech at the opening of the Ring Road, an impromptu speech, but uh, dealing with the media afterwards, and you know, being very aware of which outlets I spoke to, and you know, just from like past experiences of the very few times that myself or my family were able to get a chance to speak on the radio or something, where like specific details would be cut and information would be missing or like mistranslated and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that I think that's definitely still an issue where you know, there's still a lot of voices that are missing and misrepresented.
Pardon me. Caitlin Brown asks, notes that your work seems to move across disciplines, responding to research and activist impulses. And she's wondering how you think about your practice. Do you feel like there is one discipline that you lean towards, or does the subject or concept determine the material?
Um, I think it's always different. I kind of have a hard time where like staying on one material or one subject. Um, I feel like a lot of my work is like responding to specific memories or events, and then sometimes I'm like the best way to show a memory is to use family photographs and family objects, and sometimes like the best way to show that is you know, through video, either family. I love using, I always ask my family for permission to use photographs or video. And so a lot of it revolves around my family and family materials and stuff. But I like to think that everything I do is collage. And so it's like picking and pulling different things together. So whether it's like certain objects, certain materials, you know, even like my specific memories, how I want things to learn. So it's always picking and pulling. And but it's it's always very different for me too, because sometimes like I'll get triggered by a specific memory, and like I'll have a memory of like being on the land and like being in a treehouse or something, like that my uncle built me, and this isn't a work that I made, but it's like something where I'm like immediately I'm like I want to recreate that treehouse, or either as a physical object or through photographs and different things. So yeah, I really love trying different things. So like if I do like let's say I do like a painting, then the next time I make something, you know, I won't keep painting. I'll like jump to like making a sound art piece, or making like a video. So it's kind of like jumping between things, and I feel like it gives me a break, and that I don't get bored of something. So it keeps it exciting. And in the context of galleries, I also like specifically make things that are responding to the space there. So, if a gallery is shaped a certain way, or they have like a funny window that, uh, you know, is placed in like a kind of awkward position, like, something in the space that they can't change. I like making work that also responds to the environment and the space within there. So that also affects how I make things. And yeah, it's always different, and I like trying different things. So like if I haven't, uh, you know, if there's something that I haven't tried and I'd like to do, then I will like most likely try it and see how it turns out. Like I'm not against making any type of art, or any type of working with any type of material. So that's always like open for me. Thank you.
Well, now that you've done some work with water, Sheila Bannerman has asked, have you done any other work that's related to water?
Um, I think this is my first time working with water, and I think creating this piece and working with the physical object, like working with these bottles, I think that's something in the future I want to do more of. I thought that it'd be cool to do a piece in the future that involves using like the water fountain that these go with. So using the water fountain that's in my house and hooking it up with like a microphone or something, so that like anytime someone goes to, hypothetically, if it was in a gallery, or even in, you know, it was like an outdoor installation, anytime anyone went to go drink water, like it would create a sound, or, it'd be reacting to people drinking and taking from it. So I think that's a cool idea for future project, but I haven't worked with water before, really.
Great. I'm excited to see what you do with it in the future. Courtney Faulkner asks, first of all, says thank you, and asked if you could speak more to the response to you cutting your hair at the opening of the Ring Road. How it felt for you personally since that moment.
Like me personally, how I felt is like hair is such an intense subject for me, and like my connection to hair, like before the opening of the Ring Road and everything. Uh, I think I was the first person in my family that was that like grew my hair long, and you know wanted to have braids and everything. Not a lot of the men in my family have long hair. My uncle has long hair, and so it, due to effects of residential school and stuff, there's still like those things are still in my family, where a lot of the men won't grow their hair, or they, and like that's totally okay and cool, and um, you know everyone's got to do what they got to do, but I think when I was 11 was when I wanted to grow my hair, and so I always hated haircuts growing up and everything. So when I would get taken to like the barber shop, I'd be like very grumpy and everything. And I'm sure that there's like some type of like cell memory response to getting a haircut and everything. And but since I did cut my hair at the opening of the ring road, I definitely have times where I miss like being able to braid my hair and the feeling of having like really long, beautiful hair and stuff. And that for me, it's a very nice feeling to have that. And but I feel like everything I did was still like the right decision. It was the right choice, and it was the right time and place to cut my hair there and everything. So like I don't regret having cut my hair, and I don't regret any of that stuff. So I you know um it's still something that I think about, and also don't think about, uh you know uh but yeah. Thank you for asking.
And this, following this thread, do you think that your role as an artist specifically helped you facilitate your voice in that story and in that action? And you're talking about it now, but has your status allowed you to talk about it?
Mm, so I yeah, definitely. My my mom kind of trained me to be comfortable with public speaking, because when I was in high school, she would like take me to her classes and stuff. And some of her classes, she would like take me to her classes and invite me as a speaker. Like, so sometimes I would like go there, and they would be having like a discussion on like indigenous issues and things. And so my mom would bring me as an indigenous youth and ask me if I wanted to, like, she'd make sure if I wanted to come and speak and participate in those discussions. So I would like go to the University of Calgary when I was in high school and participate in discussions and public speaking and stuff. I got a lot of training, unfortunately, like from being from myself being in high school and having classroom debates in social studies. Like, in my opinion, I think Indigenous kids shouldn't have to participate in that, in classroom debates on Indigenous issues, and that there shouldn't be debates in the first place. So I had to deal with a lot of uh, I don't know. Social studies was kind of like a war zone for me, where the teacher would be like, treaty rights, what do you guys think about it? And I'd be the only Indigenous kid in my class, and I'm like, dang, I gotta like become the representative of treaty rights and like represent and stuff. And so yeah, a lot of arguing with racist kids in high school and stuff, and unfortunately having debates. But uh, by like being an artist and everything, like when I went up there and spoke at the opening of the Ring Road, I wasn't speaking as an artist. I was speaking as myself, and I was sharing my mom's words and my mom's letter that she'd wrote that I read there. So it was, art isn't necessarily superficial, but sometimes performance and things like that, there's like a separation between like the identity of the performer and the performance itself. So for me speaking there, I wasn't thinking in terms of performance. And so all of that just like came from my own heart and everything. So yeah, I wasn't thinking of it in an art context or and that stuff. But since then, doing work and doing art has been slightly different in the way where I guess representing these issues and matters has been something that I guess I've taken on, and it's something that like I have taken on behalf of my family. Like I have to mention my family all the time, and you know, a lot of the things I say too come from my family, and you know, all of my thoughts and feelings are also very similar and the same to theirs, and so like you know, I always make sure that if I'm given the opportunity to do an interview, that you know, I ask if they want to be a part of it or if they want to speak, and they all feel comfortable with me, you know, representing my family and our stories. But that's kind of like been, you know, since that event, that's kind of how it's been. Always, you know, just being careful and making sure that, you know, what I'm saying doesn't take away from my family's feelings as well, and with their experiences and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you sort of have this separate role. You weren't thinking of an artist when you did that gesture with the ring road, but do you think that arts are an effective avenue for placemaking? And you know, by extension, do you feel like the arts are a good tool for resisting and reclaiming or critiquing displacement?
I think I think it is and it isn't, because uh, there's only a certain audience and only a certain community, and you know, people that you can reach in a gallery or in an art context. Like I don't know, a lot of the elders from my community don't go to art galleries or like don't care about the arts world and everything. So if I was to make an art piece honoring them, let's say, and I put it in the gallery, uh, you know, the people that would go to the gallery and see that, I would, you know, I'd feel like I'm making that so that people can see that and look at it. And, you know, it's very different than if like I thanked elders on a personal level and, you know, had that relationship. So I think like uh, it's an effective tool as long as you understand who you're, you know, the reach you'll be getting by using that tool, and that it's just one of the many tools and avenues. It's not the ultimate tool. Because like even people from Tsuut'ina and like leaders, I'd invited them. A lot of my work also critiques Tsuut'ina and the leaders involved with like, you know, selling land to build the ring road and for displacing my family. So, you know, I remember being kind of naive earlier on and like inviting them to like come check out my art, but they didn't. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to speak to them in an art gallery because they're going to reject it and they're not going to go look at it. So I was like, you know, a lot of like learning and understanding, you know, the most effectiveness and the most reach you can get from a particular situation. But I think it can be effective, but there's, you know, you have to understand a lot of things and a lot of the the potential, you know, all of the potential that can happen and that can't happen. Yeah.
You'll be pleased to know that after your ring road event, there were many people who came very specifically to see your work at Contemporary Calgary. So there was a nice connection. Were there, Sherry Noreen asks if there was other connections between your piece, Glenmore Reservoir, and your braid cutting at the ring road.
um I guess like connections, like story wise and intent behind making the work, you know, I don't like, they weren't directly related at all. Like I had made the work back in like the end of August or something was when I made it, and then the opening of the ring road happened, I think, on October 1st. So I had made this work way beforehand and delivered it to Contemporary Calgary, but a lot of my intent behind, all of my own personal experiences and traumas informed making this work. And those are the same things that informed me speaking out at the opening of the Ring Road and informed me, resulted in me cutting my hair and everything. But yeah, it's more like that. There's just like you know, the connection is that I made the artwork, and the connection is that I made, that I ended up cutting my hair, and the connection is me. Like that's the connection.
We are finding ourselves at time, Seth, but there's still a few other questions. I'll leave it to you. Do you want to field some more, or are you tired?
Sure, I can answer a couple more.
All right. Well, here's a fun statement first. I'll just say, I'll share. Thanks, Seth. Leaving your braids was a beautiful rebuttal to that. You're a true badass. I thought that was a good one to share. But a little bit of a different tangent, but Rula has asked, hey, Seth, what type of experimental music are you into? And does it support or contribute to your art making practice?
Thank you. So the experimental music definitely does have a impact on my art making. I'm also a musician, and I did some sound pieces. I just put them on Bandcamp, and but I recorded them while I was at ACAD, and over the couple of years, they're like sound. They're like kind of ambient, and it involves field recordings that I did at the construction site of the Ring Road and at my family's land, and there are a lot of sound manipulations that I did, and yeah, the experimental music that I've listened to, like I guess like connecting to Yoko Ono, like I love
Yeah.
Yoko Ono's art and music, and prior to this, I've been a huge Yoko Ono fan, and Sonic Youth, of course. Other things like Eric Copeland has this one record. I haven't listened to his other stuff, but he has this one record I accidentally bought because I thought the cover was cool. I can't remember what it's called, but if you look up Eric Copeland, he just has this noise album, and it's not like harsh noise or anything. It's kind of like it sounds like collage. So I think I think his name's Howie B. He has an album called Snatch. That's also experimental music. I love experimental music that sounds like it's collaged and is collage work and everything. And experimental music is something that has influenced how I approach art making and music making and all that.
Great.
Thanks.
June Higgins has asked if you are aware of what's being done to fix the water situation on your lands.
So there, there's like, as far as I know, not too much going on, but I could be wrong. There could be stuff going on that I'm unaware of, but as for things that I am aware of, I'm not aware of too much going on. Like kind of connecting things like with the river that flows into the Glenmore Reservoir, that was completely redirected by the construction of the Ring Road. So all of these natural wetlands were destroyed. And I think it was interesting, not connected to drinking water, but connected to the wetlands in the Glenmore Reservoir. I just think it's interesting because I think there's like plans for the city of Calgary to replant the trees there, and all these environmental hopes to make the land beautiful and healthy again, when I'm like, you know, you can't just like shred and destroy an entire environmental area and then, you know, beautify it and also like accommodate all of the natural habitats you've destroyed and everything. So I don't know, that not connected to drinking water but connected to the wetlands. That's kind of like the plans for the wetlands that aren't even there anymore, is to you know, rebuild them, which doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Couple things here from Kathleen Moores. First, she asks if you have any recommended sources to learn more about Chief Bullhead. And then she asks if you find that your art and the beautiful art of your mother is creating a different conversation. How have things changed for the positive?
Okay, thank you. So I have two books right here beside me. This one I read at the opening of the Ring Road. I read a passage from it. It's called Battlegrounds. It's called Battlegrounds, the Canadian Military and Aboriginal Lands. And there's bullheads actually on the cover. And it's not written by an Indigenous person, as far as I know. But it talks about bullhead, and it talks about all of these attempts by Calgary and the Canadian government to, you know, all of the pressure they put to obtain lands while Bullhead was alive and was chief, and after Bullhead was alive and was chief. And I think it's an incredibly well-written book. And you know, Bullhead was amazing because while he was chief, he, you know, he rejected all of these attempts to obtain large tracts of land and everything. And there's a famous quote by him that is in the book about not letting go of land for Tsuut'ina. And from pressure from youth that had gone to residential school, there's pressure, and he like allowed the military to lease land on the reserve for a bit, but it was just for a few years. And after he passed away, he never intended for that land lease to go on. And then after he passed away, that land lease was extended for like 99 years or something, up until I was a child, to the Canadian military. But that's a book you can learn a little bit about Bullhead. There's this book that's called The True Spirit and Original Intent of Treaty 7, and there's a bit about Bullhead. And besides those resources, there aren't very many resources written by Tsuut'ina people about Bullhead. So in the future, I want to write something either in a zine or in a little tiny book, record Bullhead stories. So I think in the future, when the pandemic isn't as intense, if you get the chance to visit with a Tsuut'ina elder, or go to a Tsuut'ina event, once, you know, everything's safe. As far as I know, elders and Tsuut'ina people, myself included, that have knowledge are, for the most part, as long as you're respectful, we're happy to share information and share the history of Bullhead. And to answer your second question, I feel like the art that I make with my mom, I feel like the art that I make on my own is, I've been kind of growing towards my practice being a lot more blunt and in your face, in the way where, you know, if I'm talking about stolen Tsuut'ina lands, I don't want people to have to sit there for 3 hours and come back to it and be like, oh, like, I get it, this is about that. I'd rather, for my work, kind of the activist part of it, to be more blunt and, you know, people to get it. And the art that I make with my mom, it's kind of a bit of like my, like, I don't know, I feel like me and my mom are punk rock in a lot of different ways. And so like that kind of comes together, where I'm kind of like more like, you know, we got to be blunt, we got to do this, versus my mom, who's, you know, she's okay with things taking a bit more time to digest and everything. And I think our work that we make together kind of comes from our own experiences and different interpretations and everything. So I think sometimes we have this give and pull with each other, which is really nice. And yeah, I think the work that we make is going to continue to like speak about our experiences with the Ring Road. And it's also really nice because we went through the same experience that we're able to get together and, you know, work and communicate our experience together. And it's very different when I'm alone and doing that with my own work. And feel like it's also better on our mental health. So, yeah. Thanks.
Well, we're probably quite a bit over time here now, so maybe perhaps I could just leave a couple comments from Chris. He says, thanks, Seth. We appreciate your work, your bravery, and your advocacy for the Tsuut'ina Nation. Mel VX says, Seth, you get cooler every time I see you in your work. I'm looking forward to learning more and seeing more of your work. Keep shining out there. And, Kathleen's really thankful for you sharing those resources and says that she appreciates your generous knowledge this evening, as do I. Very, very appreciative of how generous you've been with your time and your heart, and really giving us some insight into your practice and your politics and your strong beliefs. And it's just been a really informative evening. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, and to everyone at Contemporary Calgary, and thank you to all of the other artists that I got to be in the show in, and thank you, Yoko, and
Yeah.
and thank you to everyone who's watched and asked a question, and all of your comments are super nice, and it means a lot, and thank you. I appreciate all of them.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.